Hello once more, everybody. It's the Timix here, excited about the start of a new series. The day has finally arrived. In fact, it's the day they decided to put up the full release build, the launch build, whatever you want to call it, version 1.001 of AI War 2. A little bit early to make sure everything was fine. The quote-unquote official launch does not actually happen with all of the attending fanfare until 11 a.m. tomorrow. But this is here and we might as well get going on it. Just a bit about scheduling and everything. I'm basically at this point going to just be throwing up new AI War 2 stuff as quickly as I can do it. It's going to be my usual methodology with this kind of game that doesn't divide specifically into missions or whatever. I'm going to do roughly 20-25 minutes edited videos, sort of breaking up the big long picture into more bite-sized chunks, if you will. Just as happened with the original AI War, I'm going to be doing a very much beginner level game first, and then progressing into more complicated things. I'll be doing at least 2 to 3 runs and possibly more, but that's going to depend on all of you, how interested you are in this, whether you want to continue. Feel free to pop down in the comments and let me know if this is something you're interested in seeing a lot more of, or if you just want me to sort of shelve it after I've covered the basics. And I also want this to be really accessible to people who have not played any AI War before. So if you're an AI War veteran, especially the beginning of this, the whole first run probably, and especially the early episodes, are going to be kind of review for you. And if you're not as interested in that, I totally understand. That's fine. But like the best feedback by far that I got with the AI War series from the original that I did, got a link to the tutorial series that I started off my runs of that with before escalating down in the description, was that it made the game more accessible to them, that it helped them understand. They were able to get into it because of the kinds of explanations that I put into that. And I very much would like the same thing here, because these games are excellent. The strategy game genre would be much worse without them. And I would like more people to be able to enjoy them, and they deserve a spotlight. They deserve credit for what they've done here. So what's different about AI War 2 compared to the original? That's kind of hard to summarize, really. I really like what I've seen so far in general. It's definitely very much revamped. A lot of hard thought has gone into what systems they want to change, what they didn't. Some people don't like the changes, but a lot of people do. The original game had a strong 87% positive rating on Steam, and this one at the moment has 89%. So the general opinion of the community seems to be that this is at least as good, maybe a little better. I've heard glowing reviews from people who have said things like, you know, ruined other strategy games for them, that they consider it to be one of the best strategy games they've played, stuff like that. And then there's the occasional person who's like, you know what, they changed this and that ruined it. And there's always going to be some of that when you make significant changes. But I do think a lot of the changes they've made is for the better. It is a much easier game to play in terms of there's not as much busy work. But I actually think it's a little bit even potentially rougher in terms of the learning curve initially. It really is a cliff with this kind of a game, as complicated as it is. And there are some parts about it that are even bigger. So, I mean, if you ask, is it a bigger game? Is it a smaller game content-wise? It sort of depends on what you're talking about. I don't think there's a straight one-size-fits-all answer to that. And I'm going to sort of walk through this slowly. Now, to begin with, when you first start up, if you go into single player, it will prompt you whether you want to go take a look at the tutorials. There's definitely more in-game instruction. They did have a tutorial in the first game, but there's definitely more in-game instruction here. If we go into the tutorials, they've got, and we're just going to explain this through the first game that I'm going to play. I'm not going to go through these tutorials themselves. I have done them myself in my research. But planetary, galactic, building fleets, resources, tech and hacking, scouting and vision, and a lot of that is stuff that has been adjusted. And then there's a whole bunch of stuff under how to play. Like, you've got all this stuff under getting started, got some basic things if you've played before, got a big list here of things that are changed. You know, you've got explanations of what the various AI subfleets do. We'll get into that. Some of them are new, some of them are different. Offensive strategies, defensive strategies, modding, you know, etc. So there's a lot more stuff that you can access within the game itself. And I think that was definitely a very welcome move forward. So what is AI War, and, you know, what's it about? What's our goal? What are we doing in this game? Well, that's over here, and this is one of the things that I'm not as big of a fan of about the starting screen, is that they've got all this stuff under the More tab. And I've always thought for your starting screen, if you've got to be under the More tab, it should be under something else instead. But having said that, got our profile things here, and that's also down here. Notice we can link to the patch notes, forum, wiki. We can report a bug on the Mantis, which is Arson Games' bug reporting site, mailing list, etc. The profile stuff, just show that real quick. I've got my name, and then you can put your color for all of your ships and units, and then you've got trim. And so I'm going with the blue and the gold or yellow. And then the background story. So this is what AI War is really all about. After an 800-year civil war between humans fighting amongst the stars, we finally birthed a force that would end all human wars forever. Artificial intelligence. So we've got a galactic game of combat. Quickly eclipsing the humans in power and taking control of most of their automated forces, the AI nearly wiped the human race from the face of the galaxy. Only scattered pockets of humans remain, hiding amidst the scattered wreckage from the Civil War and the AI-led extermination that followed. You are in command of the last substantial remaining human military force. It is so small that the AI is either unaware of it or just doesn't care. And I did like better the way the first game did it, because if you've seen that, you know, just scrolled up here, a little brief blurb on the backstory, such as it is. And I thought that was better than hiding it under a separate button. But regardless, the basic idea is the war against the machines, which is a very well-known science fiction trope, already happened. This really isn't about the war against the machines, it's about the guerrilla war aftermath, because the war against the machines lasted minutes, a couple hours at the longest. We were totally obliterated by the AI that we had created to help us. So potentially coincidentally, something outside the galaxy seems to have distracted the AI far more than humans ever did. And without that, we would simply all be dead and there'd be nothing. So that's a nice twist of fate for us. You must grow your forces, capturing and reactivating fleets from the old wars, but you must be careful not to grow so strong that the eye of the AI turns back toward you. Gain just enough power, capture just enough fleets, take back just enough planets that you can destroy the massive structures known as AI overlords, and end this new war before the AI is even fully aware it has begun. If you are too greedy, if you make yourself too threatening, if you let the AI realize you might be a true threat, expect us all to lose everything. You must use discretion, avoid distraction and temptation, and wield your forces like a scalpel. Take risks, be bold, but don't try to be a conqueror. Go for the core. And so the fundamental concept of AI War is it's asymmetrical. It's been said that the AI plays Risk while you play AI War. Are going to gradually get reinforcements and whatnot, but it is not a fair fight. It's not meant to be a fair fight. It's been called a Grand Strategy Tower Defense 4X RTS, which is a rather confusing thing, but there's bundles of all of those elements mixed into it, and in my opinion, mixed in quite well. Now, at release here, it's only a single-player game, and I'm going to be focusing exclusively on the single-player, but they do have multiplayer that they're planning on re-adding in sometime the first half of next year. And there's a blurb in here from developer Chris Park, which is worth your time if you're interested in the company and the backstory, but basically it's down to almost a one-person shop at this point. He's had some personal drama and tragedies over the course of developing the game, which wanted to spend a year doing it, end up spending about 3 or a little more. For financial reasons, they've had to minimize, and you know, this game needs to do well for him to be able to be a full-time developer, and he's real good people, so I hope that that does eventually happen. Then here we've got our, you know, the controls. As in the previous game, you've got all kinds of stuff where you can change, you know, what different things do, etc. Always can reset to the defaults, save any changes you've made, etc. I'm going to leave these as they normally are. I'm not really used to using the hotkeys. I'll need to get used to that more. And then settings. Oh my goodness, are there settings? Usual autosave stuff. When do you want warnings? Do you want to automatically build certain things or not? Tooltips, sizes, and everything. Now on the HUD here, we'll see why in a bit, but I've actually expanded the HUD so it's easier to see in the videos. We can change the audio. I've tried to get that right, but if there's parts of it that you feel are too loud or too soft, it's too loud compared to me, etc. Try to balance it so you can hear what the game is doing, but that it doesn't overwhelm what I'm saying. And then, you know, display various things, the various cameras, all kinds of things that you can change here. That's much more involved than the previous game. Now, I should mention here before we dive in, this is not going to be, like, this beginner walkthrough is not going to be the end of that. Because one of the things that Chris Park does as a developer is he continues to add stuff. Like, this is just the point at which he thinks the game is pretty polished and pretty ready. But he's been developing it for a long time. He's going to continue to make changes in the future, especially if it's successful. So if this is like the first game, which had 6 expansion packs over several years, I'm just going to be adding on to the end of this series over time as new things are released, as, you know, significant mechanics get changed or tweaked. If there are DLCs, I'll add things to the end of this beginner walkthrough in sort of an appendix form to sort of show what those new things are. So this is a series that will probably grow with the life of the game and hopefully keep everything up to date and current. At least that's the plan. I also like what they've done with the load game option here. You can continue the last save, but then also they subdivide your save files by campaigns, and if you're done with a campaign, you don't want it anymore, you don't have to go into, like, delete each file individually. You can just hit delete campaign. It'll get rid of everything associated with that. And this is a bunch of stuff from my practice research game. And you can sort it differently by campaign time, by date, by name. And you know, I find that the time is the most useful because then it'll put your most recent one on top. So to begin a new game, we can either go into custom start, which we're going to show real quick just to see what some of the options are, and goodness gracious, there's a lot of them. But then there's also several quick starts. You know, you can sort of start in a predefined scenario and you don't have to go through all of that. I think that's a great idea. I'm going to go through this first. Okay, so we have the map here. And I don't have very many quibbles with this, but I do have one. And that it can be really difficult to see everything in between all of this, depending on what you're doing. Now, we've got different map types. Realistic just has, you know, fairly standard connections. More messy and organic, they say. Simple is just the connections between the planets are less. Okay? And we can change the planet that we start on if we want. So we can see this right here, etc. Ward, wherever we want to go. And whether they link. And then the constellation. So the ways in which the planets link together can further be done there. Let's see, bubbles. And that's not available for all of them. Bubbles, you can see we've got just all these different circles. Spiral snake. Oh yeah, remember that from the Spire game if you saw that one in the original AI War. We've got grid, which is pretty self-explanatory, and we've got different types of grids. And I also like this, that you like have sometimes the type of map and you've got sort of a subtype thing there. Honeycomb. And there's several others, but the point is there's many different varieties. There's the ever popular X that some people like because you can just cut off large sections if you control that middle. And then we've got the naming style. Personally, I'm a fan of Kahuna's Real Stars. Kahuna, of course, being probably the single biggest expert at the original game, at least. And so that gives us those names. Let's switch back to a realistic style for this. There we go. And you can do with the standard, which of course is the default names. And this no gravitas is various science fiction type stuff. Of course, you got stuff like in there like Minority Report, Vision of Hope, Youth Psychology, etc. And then there's all kinds of city ones that you can use. Like, for example, we could do French and Spanish cities. So all of those are options. You can put in your own seed. You can randomize, re-randomize, regenerate the map. All of those things. Then factions. Okay, so here's where it starts. You start to see things are getting a lot different. Now for us, we've got different options for what we're going to start with, and how many cryogenic pods, how many home settlements. These are double-edged things. And then we've got different fleet settings that we can use to start, beginning structures we're going to have. And then notice there's only one AI. In AI War 2, there was always at least 2 AIs. And then we've got the type of the AI. They had an AI type in the original, and then with later expansions, 2 types that would be active at once. But you can see they've got all kinds of stuff here. This is sort of the default, and then this is default with less variety. And then, like, they have the sniper, long-range ships and turrets. The thief tries to steal your stuff. The turtle is a well-known one from the original game. Mostly defends, doesn't attack you as much. And then there are different AI fleet types, and we can have separate settings and even difficulty levels for just those particular subfleets. Now, in terms of what do the difficulty levels do? Like, what does that mean? Well, if we pop this down, it's so easy it might be asleep. It will go 1 through 10. And in the original, they had sub-difficulties up at the top, like 7.3, 7.6. There was like a 9.2, a 9.8, you know, stuff like that. But here they're just integer levels. It's probably a good simplification. Actively does stupid things for number 2. Just wanting to mess around with no stress. You've never seen RTS ever before. Vaguely familiar with RTSs, but yeah, it doesn't have much. And so it gets more difficult as it goes up. And as the comment here says, you know, 7 is very much considered to be standard. There's very little that the AI can't do on 7 that it'll be able to do later. The upper difficulties after 7 are mostly about just increasing economy, increasing numbers for the AI. But 7 is sort of the standard. It's got all of the tricks unlocked, which means you shouldn't assess AI behavior on anything lower than that, because it's intentionally been handicapped. It's intentionally doing dumb things. Then 8, sweet spot for veteran players, and I found that to be very true. On the original AI War, I think I would be between an 8 and a 9 difficulty in terms of like the place that I should have been playing at for a challenge. And then, of course, there are still people who play up at the top. The difficulty level is not meant to be fair. It has economy and whatnot cranked up. If you win here, that's something we traditionally consider a bug. You are supposed to lose every time. Please file a bug report with how you won so we can fix it. That just tells you how it's supposed to, like, it's supposed to be there, and they explain the why at the bottom. There's some players who are just that good. They try to figure out how they're able to do it and sort of close those loopholes is the general idea. Basically, for our beginner walkthrough, we are going to start a lower difficulty, and then we'll go up to 7 for a standard game. So the Warden fleet is the defensive fleet, defends AI against your attacks. It's very similar to the Special Forces in the first game. Then the Hunter fleet, it's similar, but not exactly the same as the Threat fleet. It's going to go on the attack, and you've got different settings for these as well, as far as how intelligent you want them to be, and then what is their difficulty level. So there's more options for both customizing how you start the game, how they start the game, and you can have more or less AIs. Like, you don't have to have the 2. You conquer one homeworld, then the other in the first game. This one you can start with 1. Or you can start with, like, 7. You know, like, we could just keep throwing on more AI factions. Like so. There's 4. I mean, I'm sure there's a limit at some point. I haven't explored what that is. But the point is, you don't have to stop. Like, you can have a lot of different AIs. You can have just one. You can do any number of things there. And then there's more stuff in the factions. The AI risk analyzers is very similar to the Spire civilian leaders from the first game, only if you capture the risk analyzers, causing AI progress to gradually go down, you are feeding into them AIs attacking more exogalactic strike forces against you. So there's more of a risk reward with it. I tend to like that overall. Astro Trains are back, but they're a little different. Haven't experimented with those yet. The Dark Spire is back. Devour Golem is back, or AKA the Cookie Monster. Human Resistance Fighters to aid us. Zenith Dyson Sphere returns. Zenith Trader returns. And then we got these things in here which are kind of new. Marauders aren't new. We've seen them before. Then the Macrophage is a biological exogalactic threat that hates the AI and you. The Nanocost is a nanobot version of that. It also hates the AI and you. So there's more options there. We don't have the traditional Spire game that you could play in the first one, but there's a lot of different choices, and many of them would simply do things that you couldn't have done in the first game. Like, we talk a lot about the engine could not have supported things like the Macrophage and the nanobots, and then we've got options. And there's an AI Civil War faction where you have the AIs will fight against each other. You can ally with the AI, and that would be totally weird, but it'd be like a sandbox type of game. We can allow the AI to retake planets, and I have that defaults to on. The shark plots are back. Guards, aggressive distance, and these are just AI behaviors. And we can change different things with the waves, whether there's warnings, different kinds of waves available. We can balance the, various comparative strength of things easily here. How many capturable things are going to be seeded into the galaxy? How many destroyable things are going to be seeded into the galaxy? How does the FRD, which stands for Free Roaming Defender, I think it's also called Pursuit mode elsewhere in the game. And then, stacking units for performance. You could have your harvesters die permanently, which would just be terrible. And other things could die permanently or leave remains. So there's a lot more choices to be made. There's a scouting thing here that we'll get into later. And a lot of the stuff, especially like balance, is new. A lot more ways to sort of tweak your experience. If you don't like certain aspects of the combat, you can say, you know what? I want the strike craft to be more powerful, less powerful, and you can do that. You can see there's a wide range from here. It goes from 0.5 all the way to 6 times for attack power. So, we're going to leave all of this stuff on default for the early runs in order to get a handle on it, but there is so much to deal with here. For a release version, this is really impressive, the amount of different things that you can do with it. Okay, quick starts. There's a bunch of these as well. We'll just start at the bottom. Fun with factions. We've got a bunch of Marauders. We have this one, which has the Swarmer AIs, guard posts that spawn numerous weak drones constantly. It's got the Macrophages, just all kinds of stuff there. There's a couple that have been built by the community, and most of these are set to standard AIs, but like this one has 3. This one has 2. Yeah, I didn't mean to. And you've got Astro Trains added to that. And you've got a couple of Civil War setups. You've got harder ones, and none of these are really above 8. The different sizes of galaxies, the different AI types, all of that are going to contribute to it. And then we're going to go back to basic. One here, Helping Hands, that was added recently that's almost sandboxy. It's not quite there, but it's got a really weak AI. It's got lots of helpers for you. And I'm going to go with more of a standard one for this run. So we're going to do the basic walkthrough. Now, difficulty 4. That's quite low. The tutorial game I did on the first game was actually difficulty 5. But this is a very basic level, one simple AI. And the thing is, I actually think that the lower difficulty levels, at least at this point in the development, like there doesn't seem to be as much differentiation as there eventually was in the first game between the difficulties, and maybe that will change over time. And the goal here is just to learn and go through the mechanics, understand how to play the game. We don't want a super hard opponent. We don't want a game that's going to take a huge amount of time. We just want to learn how things go, and then we'll ramp up from there. Okay, so we are going to dive in here to difficulty 4, basic beginner game, and find out some specifics. What exactly is new in AI War 2, and how does this all work? We're running long enough for now, though, so we will get that going next time. Till then, thanks for watching, everybody. I'll be back soon, and feel free to ask any questions, anything that wasn't clear, anything perhaps I missed. Feel free to throw those out in the comments below. We'll try to get to them in future videos. Other than that, we'll be getting to the actual gameplay when AI War 2 returns.